Mom, it's a small, elegant wedding. We don't think you should come. I froze. There was a faint whisper behind him, soft but sharp, like a knife sliding between my ribs. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I swallowed hard and said one word. Understood. 2 hours later, my phone was blowing up. 22 missed calls from the son who had just told me I wasn't welcome at his wedding. But before we get to that, I want to ask you something. Where are you right now? Morning coffee? Late at night, scrolling quietly? Whatever it is, pause for a second. Take a deep breath. If this story touches you, leave a comment below and let me know where you're listening from. Because this isn't just my story, it's about love, sacrifice, and the quiet betrayals that can hit anyone. I'm Eleanor James. I'm 67. I live in Dayton, Ohio. That Tuesday, I was sitting at my kitchen table, clipping coupons from the Sunday paper. Quiet house. The clock above the stove ticked. Somewhere outside, a dog barked. And then my phone rang. Daniel. My son. Weeks had passed since we'd really talked, just rushed texts, short voicemails. I missed him. Hey Mom, he said. Got a minute? Of course. I tried to sound cheerful. How's my groom-to-be? There was a pause. And then a faint female voice behind him. My stomach sank. Mom, we need to talk about the wedding. I forced a laugh. Guess I might need to crash it, huh? He swallowed. It's very small. Very classy. She doesn't really want you there. She thinks you might bring drama. Drama. That word hit me like ice. All my life, I'd worked to make sure he never went without, made sure our family stayed afloat. And now apparently I was a problem. I asked softly. Is that what you think too? Please Mom, don't make this harder. We can celebrate another time. Just you and me, he said. It hit me. I hadn't been asked anything. This was a decision already made, without me, about my presence at my own son's wedding. I said one word again. I understand. After the call, the house felt unreal, tilted slightly, like someone had moved my life just enough to make it unrecognizable. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at old bills, coupons, and the little trinkets on the fridge. Daniel's first kindergarten handprint, Lily's carefully colored birthday card. The hurt solidified into quiet resolve. If they wanted distance, I could give it, but on my terms. 2 hours later, the phone started buzzing. By the 15th buzz, I was smiling faintly. By the end, 22 missed calls. Turns out, when the wedding venue calls about missing deposits and balances gone, suddenly your number matters. For most of my life, I'd been the one who figured everything out. Widowed young, I raised Daniel and Lily alone. My husband, Mark, passed suddenly in his sleep at 42. Insurance barely covered the bills. No warning. No goodbye. Just a Tuesday morning where I rolled over and he was gone. The funeral was small, tasteful. People said the right words. But then came the bills, the mortgage notices, the medical expenses. And the realization. I had to provide for these 2 kids. I had to be strong. I picked up diner shifts at 5 a.m., cleaned office towers downtown until 2 a.m., did bookkeeping late into the night, cooked dinner, checked homework, tucked them into bed, and did it all over again. That was life. That was survival. And through it all, I learned a lesson. Mothers figure it out. Always. Daniel was fearless, 15, all elbows and energy, climbing anything and laughing like life was a game. But after Mark died, something changed. He watched me carefully, noticing how tight money was, how fragile we were financially. Lily, 13, was the opposite. Thoughtful, careful. Always asking, Mom, do we have enough for groceries this week? Her small voice would tremble slightly. And I lied every single time. Of course, sweetheart. We're fine. But we weren't fine. Not even close. That's when I started Project Wings. A secret savings account. Every tip, every extra shift, every tax refund went in. Not for me. For them. A soft landing. A cushion. A chance to fly. Daniel got into Ohio State. I cried quietly when he hugged me. Tuition, books, dorm fees, it was overwhelming. But I smiled. I wanted him to feel security I had never known. I secretly bought him a condo after graduation. He protested. I can't accept this, Mom. You're not accepting it, I said. You're living in it. Consider it your soft landing into adulthood. He cried. I cried. That day, I felt like I had finally done my job. Even after that, I helped quietly. Student loans, rent, car repairs, health insurance. Always quietly. Always without expectation of thanks. Years of giving, years of silent sacrifice. I told myself it was love, motherhood. But the wedding call was the moment I realized love without boundaries can be dangerous. My son's fiancée had become the voice that decided my place in his life. And I realized something painfully clear. I had been more than a mother. I had been a safety net. My giving had been taken for granted. Sitting at the kitchen table, staring at 22 missed calls, I felt power too. The hands that had worked tirelessly to keep him afloat could now navigate this situation. But on my terms. Love has a cost. Dignity has a cost. And this time, I would decide that I want to take you further back, to when Daniel and Lily were small, when Mark was still alive, and I first learned the price of love. Mark had been so full of life. We dreamed of raising our kids together. And then just like that, he was gone. I remember the first week. Bills stacking on the counter. Daniel and Lily asking questions I couldn't answer. Their trust in me. Their small voices needing reassurance. I lied to protect them. We're fine, I said again and again. But inside, I was crumbling. That's when I realized survival was love too. It wasn't just about providing meals. It was about creating a safe world. By the time Daniel started college, Project Wings had grown. Every tip, every shift, every sacrifice carefully logged in a small notebook. Books, tuition gaps, apartment deposits, emergencies, they all went in. I never told Daniel the details. I wanted him to feel independent, to feel secure, to fly. But here's the truth. Sometimes, when you give without limit, people stop seeing you. They stop noticing. And that wedding call? That was proof. Even when my own world had shattered. By the time Daniel started college, Project Wings had grown. Every tip, every shift, every sacrifice carefully logged in a small notebook. Books, tuition gaps, apartment deposits, emergencies, they all went in. I never told Daniel the details. I wanted him to feel independent, to feel secure, to fly. But here's the truth. Sometimes, when you give without limit, people stop seeing you. They stop noticing. And that wedding call? That was proof. That if you've ever felt like your love has been taken for granted, I want you to pause for a second and ask yourself, what would you have done? Would you have said yes quietly, like I did? Or would you have stood up and said, no more? I want you to think about that as we continue this story. Because what happens next will test everything I thought I knew about love, family, and respect. It was a Sunday afternoon in early spring, 3 years after I handed Daniel the keys to his condo. He'd called the night before, his voice bright, full of that spark that always made my heart lift. Mom, I want you to meet someone. Can you come by tomorrow around 2? My chest tightened in a strange mix of excitement and anxiety. Someone mattered enough to him that he wanted me there. That had to mean something good, didn't it? I arrived 15 minutes early, carrying a homemade lemon pound cake, the kind Daniel used to beg me for as a child. I knocked twice and waited. Laughter inside, then the door opened, and she was standing there instead of him. Melissa. She was polished, intentional, perfectly coiffed hair, crisp blouse, designer jeans. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Margaret. I mean Eleanor, right? She said, stepping aside. Danny told me you'd be early. Combien? I stepped inside, cake in hand, and found her perched on the kitchen counter, wine glass in hand, like she was posing for a photo nobody was taking. Daniel appeared from the hallway grinning. Mom, this is Melissa. Melissa, this is my mom. We just met, she said smoothly, tilting her glass. Danny's told me so much about you. About how you helped him. She paused, letting the word helped linger. That I set the cake on the counter. I just wanted him to have a soft landing, I said quietly. Melissa nodded, her smile polite but calculated. I caught a glint of something sharp in her eyes. She studied me like a photograph she wasn't sure she liked. The afternoon was cordial. Too cordial. Every comment she made seemed rehearsed, every laugh measured. Daniel tried to bridge the gap, like he always did, caught between his mother and his fiancée. Melissa casually mentioned the wedding again. We're keeping it small. Very elegant. You know, minimal drama. I nodded slowly, carefully. I understand, I said. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. Inside, I felt something shift. I realized I had been silent for too long in my life, always giving, always accommodating. And now, it was time to see if Daniel would notice what his mother had endured silently all these years. As we talked, memories swirled around me. Daniel at age 5, climbing the oak tree in the yard, laughing so loud it made neighbors frown. Lily, 6, carefully organizing her colored pencils, making lists for every chore and school assignment. Mark's death came like a shadow I couldn't shake. Suddenly, 2 kids depended entirely on me. Bills, rent, groceries, tuition. No time for grief. No room for weakness. Survival was love. I remember sitting at the kitchen table at 3 a.m., calculator in one hand, coffee in the other, trying to stretch every dollar so Daniel and Lily could have a safe, happy life. Sometimes I skipped meals. Often I skipped sleep. Always I reminded myself. Mothers figure it out. By the time Daniel started college, I had built Project Wings. A secret savings account. Every extra dollar, every tip, every refund went in. Not for me. For them. Books, tuition gaps, apartments, emergencies. I covered it all quietly. Daniel had no idea. I wanted him to feel independent, safe. I wanted him to soar. And I did. He graduated, moved into his first apartment, started his career. I quietly paid off loans, covered rent gaps, helped with car repairs, insurance, even groceries when necessary. I believed love was measured by sacrifice. But I was learning, slowly, that people can take love for granted if it has no boundaries. That evening, Melissa commented on Daniel's condo. "It's very nice," she said, glancing at me. "You really went above and beyond." I forced a smile. I wanted him to start life on stable ground. That's all. Melissa tilted her head. "He's lucky to have you." I nodded, but inside I felt the subtle sting. Lucky. Lucky. No. I'd given everything. Everything. And now, I was being reduced to a helpful benefactor, rather than a mother who had fought silently for decades. Daniel, sensing the tension, spoke quickly. "Mom, she's just nervous. You know how weddings can be." I laughed softly. "I understand, Daniel." "Really?" That night, after leaving the condo, I sat in my car. I thought about every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every job, every unpaid bill I had quietly covered for my children. I realized something clear. I had spent my life giving, but never enforcing boundaries. Love without limits is invisible sometimes. You give, and people take for granted that it will always be there. Melissa's subtle control, her carefully chosen words, her veiled criticisms, she was a test. Not of me, but of Daniel. Could he recognize the cost of what I had done? Could he see the love behind the money, the hours, the sleepless nights? I decided then, no more silence. Not in small ways. Not in large. It was time to set boundaries. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, I want you to think for a moment. Would you have stayed silent, like I did? Or would you have stood up? Comment below. Share your story if you've ever been taken for granted. Because this story is more than mine. It's about boundaries, dignity, and learning that love isn't giving until you vanish. It's giving while still respecting yourself. The next week, I started small. I made calls for Daniel, not because he asked, but because he hadn't noticed a mistake he made himself. A deposit for the wedding venue was missing. The florist had the wrong flowers ordered. The caterer was confused about the menu. Instead of quietly solving everything, like I had for years, I did something new. I let him know what needed fixing. "Daniel, I can help, but you need to call them," I said. He hesitated. "But Mom, it's complicated." "Life is always complicated," I interrupted gently. "I raised you to handle it. You can call. I'm here, but I won't do everything for you this time." It was a small shift, but it changed everything. That evening, I thought back to the first wedding call. The words drama and classy rang in my ears. I realized something sharp. They had reduced me to a problem, a potential obstacle. And now, I was reclaiming my place, not as a fixer, not as a wallet, but as a mother deserving of respect. I smiled quietly. For the first time in years, I wasn't just solving problems. I was setting rules. Over the years, I had learned so much about love. Love is sacrifice, yes. Love is protection, yes. But love without boundaries? That's invisible. Melissa's presence had been a reminder. A subtle wake-up call. My children had grown, yes. But their respect? That needed nurturing too. And so I did something radical. I gave advice but stopped giving blindly. I helped, but made sure they knew my value. By the end of that week, things had changed. Daniel started making calls himself. Melissa still watched closely, but I no longer felt the sting of her judgment. That I had found my voice. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, firmly, as a mother who had given everything but finally understood. Love is not just about giving. Love is about respect. And this is only the beginning. The real test, the wedding, the confrontation, the clarity, was yet to come. If you walked beside me through this darkness, don't let go now. Subscribe. The next shadow already knows your name.